Conquerors Haki has always been a very controversial topic on my channel, and I've never really fully covered it before. I feel like I probably should at some point, and I really want to go over the very basics of it and how it works. And a lot of people tend to miss a lot of the details and get confused when I bring up certain aspects of it in a video. And if you've been a long-term subscriber of my channel, you've probably realized that I think a lot of people will end up having Conquerors Haki, and that in the New World, a lot of people usually have it because it's where the strongest are. So let me start off by saying Conquerors Haki isn't as rare as you probably think it is. Some people try to bring up the example of only 1 in a million people having it, but here's where it gets kind of interesting. Many people assume that Conquerors Haki is just something you're randomly born with. There's no real significance behind it. It's just like a holy blessing or something, but it's actually got a genetic factor behind it. 2 specific families prove this point. The first being the Monkey D family, which consists of Dragon, Garp, and Luffy. Now, all 3 of these people have shown some signs of Conquerors Haki. People have referenced that Dragon has Conquerors Haki, and we've seen Garp use the Conquerors Haki clash against Chinjiao. And lastly, it's obvious that Luffy has Conquerors Haki, so that's 3 people right there that are all family members that have Conquerors Haki or have awakened it. And the second example is Roger and Ace, who are both father and son, both of which, as we know, have Conquerors Haki. So those are 2 families that have members which all have awakened Conquerors Haki. So of course this isn't conclusive evidence because it hasn't been fully confirmed, but it does at least show that there are genetic factors behind it, because why else would a full family of individuals all have awakened Conquerors Haki? Now, if we add this fact to the idea that only 1 in a million or so people have awakened Conquerors Haki, it does show that a lot more people are likely to have Conquerors Haki, because it will eventually more and more become prominent in individuals via the spread of genes. But just keep this idea in mind for later on. People also like to point out the fact that it's very unlikely for people in the same crew to have Conquerors Haki, multiple people in a crew to have it, and I don't necessarily think this is true either, because we can see in Roger's crew there were at least 3 people with Conquerors Haki. We have Roger himself, Rayleigh, and Shanks. And those are the only people we really know of aside from Buggy. There were still some other members which we don't know for sure if they have Conquerors Haki. I would say it's pretty likely at this point because pretty much all of them that we know so far have it. And it's actually pretty crazy when you think about it, because having 3 people who have 1 in a million chances of being born with an ability all in the same crew, it's pretty insane. Now, I do think there is a reason behind this, but I will go over that later. So I might just be overthinking it, but I don't think it's that rare to have Conquerors Haki, at least in the New World. And when ideas like this are drawn in as well, it does open a lot of other doors for who could have Conquerors Haki. And let's not forget that this is still a relatively new concept. Luffy only realized that he has Conquerors Haki a few arcs ago, so there could be a lot of other individuals who don't realize they have it just yet, or they haven't awakened it, because it does take a lot of trauma and willpower to end up awakening this ability. And this is where one of the biggest factors of Conquerors Haki come into play, which is what Treble calls the qualities of a king. Both Rayleigh and Treble have both noted that people with Conquerors Haki exhibit qualities of a king. They are often big leaders in society. They are often kings. So that kind of narrows down the possibilities of who can have it. And when we look at all the individuals who have been revealed to have had Conquerors Haki, pretty much every one of them is a leader of some sort. We have Boa Hancock, who is the leader of the Kuja. We have Doflamingo, who is the leader of Dressrosa. We have Gold Roger, who is the king of the pirates. We have Whitebeard, who was a very big Yonko commander. The fact that these guys are so big in the New World and other places in the world shows that they are able to naturally draw people to them, naturally able to gain followers. And this also ties into what Mihawk said in Marineford, which is the notorious quote of Luffy having the ability to gather people without really any effort. A lot of people try to point this to just his personality, but I think getting a huge number of prisoners to follow you at a moment's notice is not something that personality can get you in the world. Instead, I think it's actually Luffy's spirit, or the awakening of Conquerors Haki in his spirit, which is what draws people to him. And this leads into the next main ability of Conquerors Haki, which is to dominate others. And this is more of in a physical sense, and there are 2 steps to these that we've seen thus far. The first step is the ability to show your dominance on others. This is more of a weaker version of Conquerors Haki, which we saw Shanks use on the Sea King, and we also saw Luffy use it on Motobaro. Instead of knocking them out, it just makes them scared or submissive. And the second step is completely knocking people out, and this causes them to often pass out and fall to their knees and sort of look like they're bowing to you, like you're a king. So obviously those with very strong willpower and who are very good natural leaders with big egos and can naturally draw people in, those are all big signs of having Conquerors Haki. Now going back into Roger's crew, there were at least 3 people with Conquerors Haki, and obviously there could have been a lot more. We don't really know about his whole crew just yet. But as we know, when Roger disbanded his crew, most of his crew members went out to be their own leaders. Even Buggy, who was sort of a wimp, he went out and became his own captain. Shanks became a Yonko, and Rayleigh didn't really do much, but he was still very strong. The point is, Roger was naturally able to draw in people with huge leadership qualities, and for someone who had such little to give, he was just a little guy with a straw hat, and people just naturally were attracted to him. And we see guys like Shanks and Rayleigh now, and you wonder how could people have joined under one guy who were this strong. So I think this draws a lot of parallels to Luffy's crew, and it's kind of too early to say for sure, of course, but Luffy's crew is still developing. They're still in the New World. They're not huge members of the New World just yet, and many members of his crew exhibit these leadership qualities. Now this doesn't necessarily mean that they all have Conquerors Haki or anything like that, but it wouldn't surprise me if, just like Roger's crew, some of the members of Luffy's crew had it as well. I would say at least 3 is a good number to start at. Obviously, the Monster 3. Zoro and Sanji, who are still beginning to show their true colors of Haki. We don't know much about their Haki abilities just yet. We know that Luffy has had a huge emphasis on his Haki, but we haven't seen any individual development from Zoro and Sanji just yet. But some ideas do show that they could very well be developing Haki, Conquerors Haki, or they could already have it. Now, I personally think Zoro has shown the most signs of this ability. Zoro has shown many different signs of having the weaker version of Conquerors Haki I brought up before, the Step 1. Now, many people would obviously point this to Zoro's natural intimidation, but I think it actually goes further than just his physical body. I think it does go as far as his spirit. Even Kaku, when he saw Zoro's Ajura, he kept pointing toward this ability stemming from Zoro's spirit. And as we know, Haki is more of a spiritual ability than a physical one. And when we saw the Great Dragon Shock that he used against Monet, it draws a lot of similarities to when Shanks scared away the Sea King and when Luffy scared away Motobaro. It's a very weak version that is able to intimidate enemies to sort of put them into a state of panic or fear. So if these are early signs of developing Conquerors Haki, I think it would draw a lot of parallels to Rayleigh specifically, because he's the Dark King. He has always been known for being a huge master of Conquerors Haki. So if this intimidation is something that stems from Conquerors Haki and Zoro, it would really be cool if he has any sort of parallel to Rayleigh in regards to the whole Dark King concept. And then there's Sanji. A lot of people wouldn't expect him right away because he's never really been one of the most prominent members of the Straw Hats. He's always been sort of third. And the fact that he hasn't gotten any good fights in the New World and he's kind of gotten knocked around a little bit here and there kind of makes people think less of him, and they think it's a lot less possible for him to have Conquerors Haki or any other form of Haki for that matter. But we do know that he has the 2 colors of Haki, and even though he hasn't really demonstrated them just yet, I do think he is going to reveal a lot of other abilities. But why would one of these abilities be Conquerors Haki? Why would I go that far? Well, going along with the qualities of the king, Sanji has always been one of the most egotistical people on the crew. He's always seen himself as somewhat of a leader, and in some cases he'll even step over Luffy to achieve his goal, the captain. Let's not forget that he is also a prince. He is a part of a organization that is known worldwide as sort of a mysterious dark army. And if the qualities of a king were to apply to anyone in the crew, I think it would be the person who is literally royalty. And to the people who might say that Judge is too weak for Conquerors Haki, I think that he was just messing around, honestly. And we saw that when he was serious, he sent Sanji flying into a wall, sort of like what Doflamingo did. And let's not forget, in Fishman Island, Zoro and Sanji were the only ones who weren't surprised that Luffy had Conquerors Haki. They almost seemed to expect it, and they seemed like it was almost a necessity for him to be captain. And let's not forget that Zoro and Sanji were the only 2 to really demonstrate spiritual abilities ever since Enies Lobby. And One Piece is a very sort of literal show. It's very scientific in some regards, and there's not too many spiritual abilities, at least not back then there wasn't. But as we know now, Sanji can generate fire from his whole body, sort of like an aura, and he looks sort of satanic almost. and Zoro can use Ajura, a demon aura. Both of these could be some form of ability that Conquerors Haki grants you. And one final candidate is Usopp, and one of the most compelling reasons to think that he might end up developing Conquerors Haki is that all of his lies come true, and toward the end of Dressrosa he lied about having Conquerors Haki, which he obviously doesn't right now, but if he lied about it, that means he might eventually get it. And it wouldn't be too surprising considering Usopp always has shown qualities of a king. He's been the only person to really ever challenge the captain to the point where he's actually sort of declared war on him to take the ship for himself. And he was able to gather a huge number of allies under him in Dressrosa, and they all called him God Usopp, and he had the highest bounty. This is all mostly for comedy, but if you look at it in a more literal sense and you take away the comedy, it's pretty serious the fact that he could get this much credibility out of nowhere. And if he can actually harvest this sort of luck and ability to gather people under him in the future, he could end up being very strong, sort of like Yasopp, his dad. And we know Yasopp is a part of Shanks' crew, and Shanks is a very notorious pirate when it comes to Conquerors Haki. He's a Yonko. So some of Shanks' top members like Ben Beckman and Yasopp might even have Conquerors Haki as well, sort of like Roger did. Now once more we may be brought back to the point that it's such a rare thing to have Conquerors Haki, and how are these people able to find others with Conquerors Haki? It's a 1 out of a million chance. You probably have a better chance of winning the lottery than finding someone with Conquerors Haki. Now I think this could boil down to something as simple as people with especially strong Conquerors Haki like Monkey D. Dragon, Roger, and Luffy. I think that they have some form of tracker ability. And it sounds pretty weird at first, but the fact that Luffy was able to know from the get-go that Zoro would be a member of his crew, when he heard about Zoro, even though it was all bad things, he instantly wanted Zoro on his crew. And when he heard about Sanji being a cook, he instantly wanted Sanji on his crew. When he heard about Usopp, he automatically wanted Usopp on his crew. And even with Roger, when we look at the flashback, he for some reason really wanted Rayleigh on his crew. And Rayleigh looked like a bum at the time. Why would he want Rayleigh on his crew when he could have some, big strong dude? I think he could tell that Rayleigh had a very strong spirit, and he could just instinctively know it. And it's always been pointed out that the Straw Hats have very strong willpower. They've always been leaders. Each one of them have been some form of leader, second in command, an actual captain. So the fact that Luffy and Roger could gather all these people under him who all have very strong spirits and leadership qualities really goes to show that they have some form of special ability. It could go into the will of D, but I sort of doubt it. Once again, it's too early to say for sure who might have it or what the real characteristics of Conquerors Haki are, but that's what makes it fun to theorize about it. So tell me what you think. I know this is a very controversial topic, so I'll probably get some level of hate on this, but just try to keep an open mind, and hopefully you understood my points and stuff. Leave a like, a rating, subscribe if you want to, and I will see you all later.